Hello and welcome to the De-Stress Podcast with me, Dr. Amanda. On this podcast, I take time to unpack the often underestimated impact that stress can have on our lives, our bodies, and our health. And I do that through some fascinating conversations with experts and everyday people. And today is the same. We have more fascinating conversations with you. But before we get into it, I said in the last podcast I was going to share with you a bit of my plans for this new year, 2024. I realise that we're in February, but for me, I said last time, January is a bit of a recovery month, and then often I start with some new goals and things in February. I have been, for the last few years, picking a word to describe what I'm doing for the year or what I'm aiming to do. And I found that works a lot better for me than, having a specific resolution or specific goal. Now, I do have goals throughout the year, but I'm going more for a feeling that I'm trying to have or achieve or a theme for the year. And this year, it is all about reconstruction. I feel like the last few years, especially since I started having children and I had my own mental health crisis a couple of years ago, that it had been deconstructing a lot of things for me. So I have always been a very type A person, plan everything to the 11th degree. I have always been someone that had a very clear 5-year plan, planned out month to month. I knew exactly when I was going to finish med school and what training I was going to do and when my holidays were going to be and when I was going to get married and when I was going to have children. I was very prescriptive. And then things did go to plan, but the journey and the planning of it and the way that it all came to fruition has been different, quite different for me. And I found myself now not quite wanting to stick to the plan and not really knowing what the plan is. And I feel like the last few years, as I've gone through my own mental health struggles and learning how to rebuild myself, my life, my family, relearning who I am, a lot of those things were kind of deconstructed for me. I've been left with kind of the foundations of what at the core is important. And so I feel like now I'm in this period of time where I think this year is going to be a lot of reconstruction. And so I've been stripped away and then here I am now trying to reconstruct a lot of what my goals and next steps are and doing it in a way that's a bit less prescriptive than what I'm used to. And so, yeah, that's my word for the year. And so I don't have any massive resolutions or things to share with you throughout the year, but I will share with you what I'm doing at the moment. I'm really trying to prioritize my health. Like I said, the last 5 years, I have either been pregnant or breastfeeding constantly. And this year is the first year where I'm not pregnant. I'm not planning to be, I don't think. I'm not breastfeeding and my children are over the age of 1 and they are sleeping through the night for the most part. And so I'm trying to prioritize my well-being as well, because I think a lot of it has been giving. And although that will never change, especially as a mother, it's just trying to prioritize my well-being a bit more. And so, have you guys heard of 75 Hard? 75 Hard is basically a challenge where for 75 days straight, you are doing 5 things to try and better your health. And if you miss a day, you have to start back from day 1. So it's 75 days consecutively with no cheat days, no break days. I think it's basically like drinking 4 litres of water a day, reading 10 pages, doing 2 45-minute workouts, one of which you have to go outside for, sticking to whatever diet you choose to stick to, and something else. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do the full 75 hard, but I have decided that I'm doing a bit of a challenge for myself, just to push myself to have daily habits to prioritise my health and well-being. And so starting from now, it's just the end of the school holidays, and I'm doing this until the next school holidays, which is in Easter. Basically, I'm doing my own version. It's over 6 weeks, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to drink 3 litres of water a day. I'm terrible at drinking water, so let's see how it goes. 3 litres of water a day, doing at least a 30-minute workout every single day. And so usually I do like 3 workouts a week and then I just see how the rest of it goes. But I'm trying to do 3 intentional workouts, even if that's something that's quite low intensity, even if it's just going out for a walk, which I've done quite a bit this week, where if I've not been able to fit in a home workout or not motivated to do a home workout or couldn't get to the gym, after work, I would just after work, once the kids are gone to bed, put on my trainers and just go out for a walk, whether it's raining or whatever. And so I've done that a couple of times this week just to get that going. Also, reading every day. I'm not specific on what kind of book. I'm in a book club, one that I started, the De-Stress Book Club. And I'm reading every day. I haven't specified how much. It might evolve over time. I'm also trying to go back to being strict intermittent fasting. And so restricting my hours of eating to about an 8-hour window. And so that's what I'm doing at the moment. And then also trying to journal every day as well. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. And so anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. Please let me know if you're watching on YouTube, comment below if you are doing anything for the new year, what your plans are. But it's time for us to actually get into the episode now. So today, like I said, it is no different to any other episode. It is another incredible guest and fascinating conversation. And today we're going to be talking about our gut microbiome. Now, my guest is somebody called Dr. Siobhan McCormick, and she is a GP and has been a GP partner for over 30 years. She has a special interest in women's health and also mental well-being. And she now is also an expert specialist in lifestyle medicine, in particular the gut microbiome, our microbiomes in general. Now, Siobhan has said that when she saw firsthand what she refers to as a tsunami of non-communicable diseases that were taking over modern day medicine and also putting so much pressure onto our healthcare system, she started looking for solutions and answers, and that is where she found lifestyle medicine. And she too completed her qualification in lifestyle medicine through the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. She now is a host of a podcast with BSLM, with her co-host Dr. Sheena Fraser, who's also a GP up in Scotland, and the two of them explore what is the incredible systems, the rainforest she refers to inside our bodies, called our microbiomes, in particular our gut microbiome. And she really does research so much into it. She is so knowledgeable, but also she's so passionate about it and so poetic when she talks about the incredible things that our bodies can do. So in this episode, you actually see me and Siobhan really gushing over how incredible lifestyle medicine is, both for our own health and also for our patients' health as well. So I really hope you enjoy this episode, and I will see you next time. Please also don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If you are listening on podcasting platforms, please make sure to subscribe and follow along as well, and rate and review this podcast so that more people can hear this really incredible information. Hi, Siobhan. Thank you so much for joining us here on the De-Stress podcast. How are you today?
Amanda, I'm very good. I'm really excited to be here, and lovely to see you again.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so excited about this conversation. And as I always do in the start of every episode, is just to tell you how I connected with my fabulous guest. And well, as many people know on here, I'm qualified, I've been board certified in lifestyle medicine, and being part of the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine, we get emails all the time about different things that are happening in the lifestyle medicine world, the lifestyle medicine universe. And I remember getting an email about a new podcast that they were releasing called the Microbiome Medics. And I was like, oh, so interesting, because and we'll talk about this a bit later, but I don't remember being taught specifically about the gut microbiome. And I remember somebody that wasn't a medic bringing it up to me, and I was like, oh, what is that? And then I realized, once I looked into what this gut microbiome was, that there was some kind of teaching on it. And so since then, I've been really looking into the gut microbiome and just trying to understand more about this incredible thing that we'll talk about in just a moment. And so when I saw that this podcast was there, I was like, oh, absolutely, let me have a look. And then fast forward to September 2023, went to the BSLM 2023, the annual conference in Manchester, and you and your co-host were doing a talk, and you shared your story of how you got into the gut microbiome, and I found it so interesting. And
yeah, you just said so many things. You just really got me fired up. And so right there and then, before I left the room, I had to talk to you and try and connect with you. And then here we are today. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for finding the
It was
time.
lovely that you came up afterwards and you look so enthusiastic. And it always surprises me how interested people are, because Sheena and I are a bit nerdy about it. But I remember the conference you're talking about, we only had a relatively small room that could fit maybe 120 people in. And there was like queues down the corridor. I was in the queue. I didn't realize it was for our talk. And I'd love to say it's because we're amazing, but it's because the subject's amazing. I mean, these people didn't know us. And it always surprised me. So in fact, they asked us to do another talk and we did one back to back. So, and it was packed. So we had to let people come and sit down, and all the fire regulation people were getting, worried. We got everyone in
there.
Yes, yeah.
And there were people on the floor.
It was really fun though, because we were, letting everyone in. We weren't meant to, we let them through the back door. But it always amazes me when normally in medicine, you can't, drag people to talks on, I don't know, sepsis or asthma or anything, they're all very busy. People will always come to a talk on this brilliant bit of science. And it always surprises and delights me because I love the subject. So I was delighted at the end when you came up and said, would you be on my podcast? And I went, yeah, sure. And here I am.
And here you are. Thank you. And so to start with, we are going to go into what is the gut microbiome and why it is so fascinating, so important, and why as medics really want to know so much about it. But first of all, how did you said that you and Sheena are quite nerdy about it. How did you find yourself in this position, learning about the gut microbiome and starting a podcast? And how did you get here?
Yeah, because I think it's really useful to sort of find out where your guests are coming from, because everyone brings different things to the table, and everything's relevant, whether they're medical or non-medical. Everyone's got their story and it's all really important. It all weaves together and connects, and I kind of love that. So you and I are both GPs. I'm a little bit older than you, so I qualified in 1989. So it was really, all my training was on the background of this really old school sort of form of medicine, which was based very on disease, investigations, procedures, surgical procedures, and pharmaceuticals as well. So that was the building of all my medical career, really. So I've been a GP partner for over 30 years. And increasingly, though, when I started, the proportions of people who had chronic diseases was relatively small. So those people with obesity, diabetes, and all these other chronic diseases, cardiovascular disease. But they've just got more and more, they've expanded more and more to the point where most people now have a chronic disease. It's not unusual, it's actually become the norm. And we very quickly accept it when it doesn't need to be like that. So I was finding I was prescribing more and more drugs. And then we have problems with something called polypharmacy, which for your lovely listeners, they may be on no medications, they may be on one medication, but a few of them or a few of their relatives will be on 5 or more medications. That's diagnosed as polypharmacy. And the problem with this is, although when they're testing drugs, they test one drug at a time for toxicity and safety, no one really does investigations into what happens if you put, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 drugs together. We know that there's poor compliance. So we all know from our own experience where we don't finish course of antibiotics, or from experience we have with friends or relatives, that often people either forget or don't take these medications. And also some of the medications have side effects. So it's kind of not ideal. And I think I suppose I started looking at other ways to help people and came across this idea of lifestyle medicine. I was reading a lot about sleep, and I was reading, my goodness, the science on sleep. We never got taught about sleep. Sleep was considered at medical school. It doesn't matter. You go to sleep and then you wake up and then the important stuff happens. When you're asleep, nothing interesting happens. Hey, you might have an interesting dream, but that's about it. It was a waste of time. And people used to say, I don't want to waste my life sleeping. I want to stay up. And it was also, as a medical worker at that time, you were doing these incredible kind of 120-hour shifts. So goodness knows what it was doing to your health. Yeah, it was crazy. So I read about sleep, and the science on sleep in the last 20 years is incredible. What they found out from scans and biochemical testing. And then I started reading about nutrition, and that was amazing how much more there was about nutrition. I didn't get taught any nutrition at medical school. Then this whole idea of stress and loneliness and isolation, and how it can affect your health, and how important it is to connect. The whole idea of stress and mental well-being wasn't a big thing when I was at medical school. It was more about just diagnosed psychiatric disorders like major depressions or schizophrenia. So there wasn't so much about all this other stuff that we're much more interested in now. And then I suppose I stumbled across the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine. They put it all together under one umbrella with all these different things given equal weight, which I really liked as well. I love the idea that, people's mood and mental well-being was just as important as their social connectivity, which is just as important as their sleep and their physical activity and their food. And it wasn't all about being ill and your BMI. Sometimes it can feel in the NHS it's just about your blood pressure and your BMI rather than this holistic approach. So I really like that. It's not only that I really liked it, I was blown away by the science.
Yes.
So it's not just that it sounds kind of nice, it's the science is incredible. And I'm now back at Surrey University doing a master's in nutritional medicine. And that is a real eye-opener. Because as a doctor, you'll know that you get 10 or 15 minutes to do so much. Back at medical school, I suppose I am in a way back at medical school through a different lens, but the amount they know about nutrition is just crazy. So you've got these scientists who spend 30 years just looking at one chemical particle in broccoli. And it's it's just mad. And they can't understand why we're not following their advice. And we're plugging away at the coalface where there isn't time to have a lunch break. It's crazy. So there's this kind of disconnect between the amount of science there is and how we bridge it and pass it on into practice. And we know that things like NICE guidelines, which you and I use, it can take 15 or 20 years for something to move from a university department, a really great idea, great finding, down into general practice. So I suppose then to get you back to the gut, or get me back to the gut microbiome, I started reading about that as well. And I was kind of blown away. I thought, no one's told me this. Why haven't I heard about this? I have an Amazonian rainforest in my gut that is really important.
Seriously?
It's seriously. And I feel I have to tell everyone, and I bore everyone at home and they're all rolling their eyes at me. But it is incredible that all this time, hidden inside us were these incredible sort of ecosystem of living organisms. These aren't just, passive cells, they're living organisms that are really integral to the way we've evolved over, hundreds of thousands of years. And I was kind of blown away, and I feel everyone should know about it. But it's not just that it's amazing that we've got all these living organisms inside us. It's that they're not passive passengers. We're not just a big Uber carrying these living organisms around. We are active participants in every aspect of our health and physiology. And they're kind of, if we treat them right, they're kind of the best friends we never knew we had. So it's really, good news, really.
What is incredible is that listening to your journey, even though, so since you qualified, your medical career basically spans my life. And I've come into this, I qualified in 2015 and became a GP in 2021. So it's 2 years now that I've been as a full qualified GP. And this such a similar journey, and it's quite disappointing that over this 30-year span there's so much that there's so much that's been learned but also not practiced, and that medical school is still so similar. I remember when I first heard about the gut microbiome that I thought, did I miss something? I thought, oh my goodness, was there a lecture that I didn't go to, or was I off for a week or a month, or did I miss a whole module? Because this seems so important and there was so much information out there about it. Obviously more research to be done, but once I started looking into it, it wasn't like this was, there was one paper or two papers here and there. There was so much. I was like, why was this not such a major part of our teaching? And having that, because you've seen it from a different angle, where when you first started in medicine, you saw, yes, there were chronic diseases, but it wasn't so prevalent and pervasive as it is now. And whereas when I came into it, I was just like, oh my goodness, polypharmacy and chronic diseases, and often being in my clinics feeling like there's no time for the answer here. Where is the answer for all of this? And seeing that, although not always taught the ways to implement lifestyle changes, actually seeing that so much of the reasons why people are in this situation was because of lifestyle changes. It's amazing that you saw like the journey where this modern day living has kind of taken over and our health has changed. And then I've been like slotted into where the outcome of how things have been. And so I often describe like this stage of medicine, that we're turning into like this new era of medicine, where before or currently it's all about getting you away from illness, but not really to wellness, is how I put it. So getting you to the point where we can say, oh, your diabetes, your HbA1c is 58, it's well managed. Your blood pressure is 128/74, it's well managed. But then you're also on a plethora of medications for that. But even despite those numbers looking right and aiming for that, or you had a heart attack and you had your coronary artery bypass and you've had this intervention, so you don't have any more blockages. Even though you get to that point, we have this lack of actually getting people well, where there's not just like an absence of a disease or the numbers look right, but actually your body is functioning in a way that you're going to have a healthy and independent life up until you die, rather than it being, you might prolong your life, but part of it you're going to be disabled and relying on other people and feeling terrible. And so it's just so interesting to hear your journey into it, because it sounds so similar but from two different eras. That kind of
I love this idea of timelines. So if I'm ahead of you, that bit ahead. So if you imagine in the 1950s, 60s, it was, oh my goodness, it's amazing, vaccinations, antibiotics, massive increase in lifespans because of the reduction in infectious diseases. And I guess doctors at that time thought, we have got this. Imagine what we're going to be doing in 10, 20, 30 years. Cancer will have disappeared, will have solved everything. And I suppose it was bit of a false start, really, because although there were magnificent things that happened after those antibiotics and vaccinations, it's kind of ground to a halt. And the number of drugs is these ideas that you have one pathway, you have one drug and it solves all the problem. Unfortunately, we're really complex adapting systems. So if you plug a problem somewhere, then it pops up somewhere else, and you can't just take the drug. I'm really happy about giving medications, and in the right place, they're
really helpful, but they are to put on top of lifestyle medicine. So I suppose I see lifestyle medicine as the sort of the big rock, this big foundation, which is non-negotiable. This is the evolutionary blueprint of how your body works. It's not like maybe do it, maybe not. You have to move, you have to sleep, you have to nourish, you have to connect. All these things, they're not negotiable. We do them every day, sometimes badly, sometimes not so badly, but they're things that come naturally to us. And if we're optimizing those lifestyle medicine pathways, then the need for medications and procedures, investigations just drastically reduces. Or even if we do need medications, if you're doing the lifestyle medicine stuff, you're taking lower doses and you're not getting other diseases as well. So it's non-negotiable. We have to do this, and it's beautiful. It's lovely. It's fun. Who doesn't like eating great food, walking with friends, connecting like we are now? This is like, this is not hard if you do it right, if you make it joyful and easy and make it part of your life. It's things that most of us enjoy doing anyway. But I suppose I worry that Western medicine has implied that if you get a diagnosis, you're poorly, and if you don't get a diagnosis, or if you don't see the doctor and get a diagnosis, you're well. Now, I agree with you completely. There's a big difference from, not having a disease or not a disease not progressing is different from being well, because there's lots of us who maybe don't have a definite diagnosis, maybe because we're being tested, but we're still not metabolically well. Poor sleep and poor nutrition and lack of physical activity, our bodies aren't working in an optimal way. And I suppose you and I want people to flourish. We're really ambitious for our patients. We want them. We don't want ordinary for you guys. We want the best. We want you to flourish and realize your potential, mentally, physically, and to have a great life. And health, when people say, oh, have you got your health? But actually, your health is not a destination. It's more like a verb. It's healthing. You have to do health every day. So it's a dynamic, ever-changing thing. So you don't have it and box it away and that's it. It's something that you have to kind of part of your life every day. And I think
in that era where you talked about in the 50s and 60s, where the vaccines, the antibiotics, and just understanding infection control and everything, it was such a revelation because there were so many premature deaths then. But I think maybe some complacency came with it, because now what is being taught now seems like common sense because it's how we used to live. but people still died so prematurely then, because there wasn't all of these medical interventions, there wasn't as much science, and and people go into accidents and nobody had to do operations to save them, or there would be a horrible infection that would just take people out, where now we could just give them some antibiotics to prevent the infection altogether. And so those things are important, but because of these things being introduced and feeling like that was the answer, those other parts were kind of done away with. Because if you think about the older generations, I think about like my great-grandparents, my grandparents, connection was, they had to connect. If they didn't connect physically and face to face, there wasn't another option or another way to connect. And the loneliness would be too pervasive. And to get out to work, there wasn't as many cars on the road. There wasn't anything called fast food. Like, my dad tells me about when the fast food restaurants started coming up. Like, this is all in memory. Those conveniences weren't there. And so it was a lot easier, because all these interventions, like you said, this is our how innately we should be living. But also innately, we're quite creatures of convenience. And so when the conveniences weren't there, it was much easier to live in a way that our body wanted us to be. But now that the conveniences are there and life has gotten so much more busy, of course, like, we have these tendencies to go for that more convenient way of living. But like you said, this way of like nutrition and connecting and moving, they're wonderful things to do. They're not negative things in any way. And so trying to find ways to prioritize that is really important. But before we go down a complete rabbit hole into lifestyle medicine, we want to talk about the gut microbiome. And you spoke about it a little. You said it, having our own Amazonian rainforest living inside of us. Tell us more. What is this gut microbiome? Where does it come from?
So the reason why you might not have heard about it at medical school is because we didn't know they were there. It was like this whole hidden magical kingdom inside your gut that people didn't know about, because we didn't have the technology to test it. So it was only, I don't know if you remember or historically remember, 2003, they mapped the human genome for the first time. And that was an incredible technological advances in DNA assessment. And then they sort of mapped the human genome, which is about 20,000 genes. Not that many, actually. We haven't got that many more than some, fungi and fruit flies and things. So before we get too cocky, we're not all that. So they found we had 20,000 genes, and they had all this machinery left lying there. What should we do with it? So someone in America started the Human Microbiome Project. They said, let's start seeing if we can use this DNA technology to see what else is around and look at the DNA in bacteria and see. And I think they were pretty blown away. They started looking at human microbiomes. So those are collections of living organisms living in and on body surfaces, human microbiomes, but all over the Earth's surfaces. So as you sit there, Amanda, you have microbiomes on your seat, probably on your glass. I'm sure you've got a glass of water there, on your lovely sofa behind. You've got a microbiome as well. So you've got all these living organisms on your lovely furniture. And before everyone goes, it's disgusting, I hate that, especially post-COVID, when we were taught that everything was, pathological. Most of the bacteria in the world, and there's trillions and trillions of bacteria, only about 70% of them are potentially pathogenic. And by pathogenic, I mean could potentially cause you harm in given the right circumstances. But most of them are either disinterested in you, whatever, humans, who cares, or they're actually beneficial to your health. So they do live on non-living surfaces, but also on your plants, on your pets, on your parents, on you, Amanda. So you are a walking ecosystem, okay? So as you sit there, you have different microbiomes on you. And I like to think of you as a planet. So if we I feel like I'm the voice person of these microbes, okay? So they think of you as this beautiful planet to occupy. So when you were born, you were more or less devoid of microbes, and they thought, wow, Amanda, great, Planet Amanda, let's climb on board. So they occupy you, and some like the pH and oxygen and light that your skin gives. Others like, low oxygen, so they'll be in your mouth. Others like no oxygen, so they might go and colonize your gut. So you get these groups or communities of, instead of communities of people, you've got these communities of microbes that like living in various areas, but the most of them are in the gut. So that's the big areas. So these trillions of these microbial living organisms in your gut, all sorts of different things. So the ones that people might know about are bacteria and fungi. And then there's also lots of weird names like archaea and protists, but don't worry about the names. Most of them are bacteria, and most of them live in your gut, but specifically in the big bit of your gut near the bottom called the colon. So you imagine imagine you've got this metropolis living there that we never knew about. And as I say, they're not just sitting there doing nothing, like twiddling their thumbs or their equivalent of their thumbs. They're actually really important living communities. So they protect you. So if you imagine that your gut, Amanda, is the largest surface between you and the outside world. So that's where you've got to watch. You need 24/7 surveillance. You don't want any baddie pathogens getting in and causing infectious diseases, but it's still got to let you enjoy your lunch and get all the nutrients and vitamins and minerals in. So the gut barrier has to kind of open up and let the good things through, and then close up and stop the baddies coming through. So it's this kind of dynamic wall that opens and closes. So it's a really complex, intricate architecture. And on the top of this gut wall sit these bacteria, and they really help you. They kind of are like little foot soldiers. They fire pistols of antibiotic-like chemicals at the baddies, and they take up space and say, look, no, we're looking after Amanda. No one else is allowed to sit on here. But they also produce incredible chemicals. So if you think of them like having a series of factories in this Amazonian rainforest that produce different chemicals. So there are loads and loads and loads and loads, and I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. But the one, for example, they make vitamins, so they can make your bugs can make all 8 B vitamins, which is incredible. So they serotonin, which is something that I'm sure you've spoken to your lovely listeners about. So serotonin is that neurotransmitter that's really important in positive well-being, and it's thought to be important in mood and anxiety. But 90% of the serotonin in your body, Amanda, is actually comes from the gut. And the microbes are a really important part of the metabolism or the making of that serotonin. So that's kind of really interesting as well. And then there's also this whole group called short chain fatty acids. I'll be really impressed if anyone remembers that. In fact, if you do remember that, you'll know more than any medic knows about the gut microbiome. So just imagine the factory producing short chain fatty acids, and the most important one is butyrate. So remember, beautiful butyrate. So this chemical that's made just does incredible things. It impacts your brain, your mood, your anxiety levels. It impacts your liver and pancreas and the way that you deal with sugar. So it's involved in diabetes. It's involved in your gut and what's called the gut barrier. It's involved in your skin and your bone. So it does lots of incredible things. So they're very important. One. That's exactly, honestly,
I've read.
Okay, so just to clarify, we've said so far, they protect you by acting like foot soldiers. They produce these incredible chemicals. It's like a pharmacy in your gut. So instead of going down the local high street and getting your medications, you can actually produce pharmaceuticals from your gut if you feed them properly, if you give them the right conditions. So we'll go back to that in a moment. And the other really important, and it's really difficult to get your head around, is that these microbes, from when you were born and for the first few years of your life, they're like primary school teachers. They teach your immune system how to react. Because when you think about it, these are bugs sitting in your gut. So won't your immune system react and go, have a inflammatory reaction? It doesn't. It goes, hi. It has a library of friendly bacteria, so it doesn't react to your friendly bugs. So your immune system has to recognize and go, hi, stand down. It'd be like a police force. You don't want a police force attacking everyone down the high street. They've got to know that's safe, but the guy there with a gun, we need to watch out for him. So they have to recognize and respond accordingly. You don't want over response and you don't want under response. So it's really important for your immune system development, schooling, and also the way that your immune system reacts over your lifespan as well. And then lastly, so just to go through them again, you've got these bacteria that act as foot soldiers in your gut. You've got them producing all these marvelous chemicals. You've got them teaching your immune system. And then you've got them dealing with all the other stuff you throw in your gut, like drugs. So every drug, they've done various tests on all the normal drugs that we might be prescribing, Amanda, in our general practice. And about over 70% so far they found are altered by the gut microbiota. And that might explain, Amanda, why you and I can either eat the same thing, or you and I can take the same drug, but we react really differently to it. It might not work in me, but it might be great for you. It might be toxic in me, and you might have no effect whatsoever. And this is a big problem in medicine, because some people don't respond to the drugs and other people get terrible side effects, and other people it works well for. So it's a really exciting area for everyone, whether you're in psychiatry or gastroenterology or nutrition. It's everyone's interest in the gut microbiome.
Okay. And guys, can you see why I had to get Siobhan on here? Because the gut microbiome by itself is so incredible. Even if you just sat down and just read the facts about it, but when it's put across to you in so much passion, you see why it's so important that you learn it, you love it, and it's already there living with us, but you learn how to really optimize it, because it can be one of the greatest health hacks, I think, learning how to take care of our guts. And you mentioned a lot of things there about the way in which the gut interacts with our mental well-being and our emotional state. You spoke about serotonin, which is if people take antidepressants, the gold standard or the first choice antidepressant for most people is something called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, where we're trying to increase that serotonin level. And so you said that's 90% of our serotonin is made in our gut. And we often hear the saying, go with your gut. And people have talked about like the gut brain axis. Sometimes, if you've had an exam, I remember a lot of time in med school, all my exams, the way that my gut would react, or, having to go to the toilet more. And so we often, in, layman terms, or just when we think about things, and we can see how our gut can react. And that's why that's saying, go with your gut, because even innately, when that saying was come up before this research was done, people knew that the gut was important, I think, really. But there is that connection there. But on this podcast, it is called De-Stress with Dr. Amanda. And so it would be great to touch a bit more on the way that stress can actually affect our gut, and maybe if there are ways that our gut can actually help us deal with some of the chronic stresses in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's there's so much that's not known. So, for example, you kind of think, you take that thing I said about serotonin and 90% being produced in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
And I then thought, great, well, we don't need to take these serotonin boosting drugs. Why don't we just, we'll get it all from our gut? But then it starts to get really complicated. So without sort of confusing everyone with science, just take that, for example. So although you produce 90% of your serotonin in your gut, it can't cross the gut-brain barrier, or the blood-brain barrier. So it's not, you have to produce serotonin in your brain as well. However, it does seem to do something, that gut serotonin does something at the gut level. And I think it's really important, because we keep hearing about this gut-brain axis, and I always have to remind myself, because how can tiny living organisms in your gut make you feel less stressed, more stressed, or a better mood, or a lower mood? How can that be possible? It sounds crazy. I suppose it's really important to consider communication networks. And if we look at humans, so you and I, we can chat together using our voice, but also we can give each other a bit of a nudge or a wink. And there's lots of different ways of communicating. There's also lots of different communication pathways. So we've got this podcast, we've got emails, we can phone someone up, we can write them a card. So there's lots of different pathways. And if we look at the gut, these microbes have lots of different chemical languages. For example, the short chain fatty acids or the serotonin. Think of them like chemical languages, and your microbes in your gut are really chatty. They love chatting to each other. They love chatting to local and distant tissues and organs. What's happening down here? It's all communication intel pathways. So they communicate releasing these chemicals, or stimulating the immune system to release other cytokines, which are other chemical molecules. And those molecules stimulate other pathways, for example, the vagus nerve, which is this wandering nerve that connects the brain and the gut. So maybe it'll be like me sending you an email. I'll send a message up the vagus nerve. The brain will receive that message. It might say, oh, she's eaten something a bit dodgy here. I think there might be some pathogens in it. I think she could get seriously ill. And the brain will go, right, okay, we better make her have diarrhea. So we'll send a message back that will make your gut evacuate. So you might get terrible diarrhea. And that's what we know is food poisoning, when you get sort of diarrhea after eating a dodgy meal. So there's this messages going back and forth. Sometimes the messages will be, I'm okay, don't need to do anything. And sometimes there'll be a message saying something needs to be done. And these pathways not only go from the gut and brain, they go to your gut and your skin, and your gut and your heart. And that's why you might notice when you're anxious that lots of things go wrong. Your skin goes awful, you're not feeling well in lots of ways. It can affect lots of pathways. But the really important thing to know, if you've got mood problems or if you've got stress problems, is that the gut is really, really important. And that's why everyone keeps going on about gut health, because you think, what gut health? What's that got to do with my brain? But actually what goes on in your gut is transferred by these real molecular pathways, nerves, using hormones, using immune system molecules, gets passed all around the body. Messages go up and down all the time. So your body is reacting, responding, learning, and adapting. So if you're sending good messages, so if you start thinking of food as messaging, if I'm eating really food that's not nourishing, so if it's got empty calories, what I call no food or junk food, we might enjoy it, we all do, but it's actually not nourishing your microbes, so they can't produce these beneficial short chain fatty acids and other beneficial metabolites. So they're like the factories have got nothing to work with. It's like they're trying to make bricks and you're not giving them any cement. They can't do it. So what happens? The food that you're giving them attracts or makes pathogens grow. So these are bacteria that aren't so good for you, that maybe produce toxic metabolites, chemicals that go up to the brain and go, hey, I'm feeling sluggish, I'm feeling low, I don't feel well, I feel inflamed. And they also, this is the thing when people say your bugs tell you what to eat, they might say send messages saying, I like pizza, I like junk food, because actually those are the sort of foods that those pathogens thrive on. And I think this can be useful for people, because it can be a bit extraordinary how we do get these cravings. You know that, you know, the junk food's bad for you, but we all know when at medical school we started, you know, when you're busy at work and we're eating a lot of junk food, the more you have, the more you want. It's kind of difficult to get out of the cycle. And you can feel, it's just me, I haven't got any willpower. And it's just absolutely not that. It's very, very molecular, very chemical. And if you just have an understanding of it, I think it can really help you not blame yourself. This is not about blame. This is understanding. And if you understand your body and its quirks, and, you know, parent it a bit sometimes and just say, look, I know you want this stuff, but we're going to really boost your good bacteria by eating the stuff that they like, which we'll get onto later. So that's the whole connection with the gut brain. So what you eat produces these metabolite chemicals, and they're the languages that speak to your brain and back and forth. So you want to be making the best choices possible, to make the best metabolites possible, to have the best conversation possible.
And
absolutely.
And that's the thing. So, you know, with all of that, it's what you said about this, or, you know, blaming yourself for this guilt. A lot of the time people often think, oh, I can't do these things, my willpower's not enough, I wish I had more motivation. And sometimes it's kind of taking that away a little bit and saying that actually it's not just that, understanding and with the knowledge of how your body works and what might be affecting it, that can then help you to then make these changes and have these hacks. So I'm craving this because these messages are going into my brain because I'm feeding the wrong kind of bacteria. And so now that I know that's why I'm craving it, I can stop blaming myself and start doing something different so that I can train the right bacteria to send the right messages to the brain. And so it just kind of releases you. And I think sometimes when you're stuck in this guilt trap or this willpower trap or this motivation trap, you can think that there's no way out or there's no way to improve things, but often there is. And it just lies. And that's why I think knowledge is so much power as well, because it releases you from those thought errors or those thought blocks that can stop you from moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't like this kind of willpower, it's your responsibility. I think these are just really real opportunities. You're CEO of this ecosystem. You know, they call you a holobiont now, where you're partially human cells and partially bacterial cells. And in fact, Amanda, you are 50%, by cell count, you are 50% bacterial. And if you look at your gene count, the number of genes, you are over 99% bacterial. So I would argue, who's in charge? It's crazy. Who's in charge? So if you think your conscious self, your brain is in charge of this company, really. So you're the CEO, and you know, you've got to look after your staff. Okay, if you don't pay them, they're going to get a bit grouchy. They're not going to be able to do the work if you don't give them the right stuff. So I think changing the conversation to, I mean, it's a little bit comical, a little bit whimsical, but I kind of like it, because patients often do understand. They've got kids, or they run farms, or they run organizations. They know that, you know, how to do that, and it's using their skill set and translating it to benefit their own health, really. But if you start thinking like, okay, these, you know, I'm CEO here and I've got to sort out my management hasn't been great, and I'm going to up my management skills and, you know, get the best bacteria in my gut, because if you dramatically change your diet from junk food to whole food, plant-based, your gut microbiota can change the composition. So the team you have can change even within a few days, although if you then revert, they switch back again. So you have to kind of make the change and keep the change. That's why it has to be that you love, that's easy and that's fun. So, but it's really exciting, because we used to think with medicine, you know, your genes, there's nothing you can do. My dad had a heart attack. What can I do? It's, you know, my relatives had cancer. It's my destiny. It absolutely isn't. You know, genes are not nearly as important as we thought. And even your genes, if you're dealt a bad hand, you don't have to play that hand. There are plenty of other cards to play with. You just have to not do things that trigger that hand. Drinking and excess alcohol. And it's so exciting, because I want people to feel really empowered, because these are all modifiable things. And so much more potent than, you know, pharmaceuticals, which just do, you know, are great, but they do one pathway, A to B, they do this. If you do these lifestyle medicine things and these gut microbiota change things, which are very similar, then you're changing the whole of your network. You're changing the whole of your organization. And, you know, there's not one different diet for cardiovascular disease and a different diet for gut microbiome. Fortunately, as we'll hear, they're all the same.
That's what's incredible.
Once you thought it, that's it.
Exactly. And when I went to, like, at the conference, something that I loved at the conference, though, at the lifestyle medicine conference went to this year, and I went to the one last year as well, there were so many different talks. There were 3 days worth packed of talks. There were often like ones running at the same time. And there'd be from a renal consultant, there'd be from someone doing breath work, psychiatrists, from orthopedic doctors, GPs, all different specialties, all different parts of the body that they're interested in. You'll go there and they will show the research for cancer, although they show the research for inflammatory bowel disease. The answer was still the same. The interventions were still the same. It's not.
I'm incredibly excited by that as well, Amanda, because it's not like we have to take people to a different classroom to teach them about a diet for cardiovascular, a different classroom for diabetes. I mean, it really is incredible. And it makes sense if you think of us as, you know, our evolution. So these bacteria, for example, have been around for billions of years. We've only been here for a kind of blink of an eye, so 200,000 years. So we have co-evolved with these microbes living in and on us. And they've kind of, you know, we're just another surface to occupy. And they thought, hey, we can get along with these guys. You know, they'll feed us, they'll take us places. And we, you know, have done them a service as well. So it's this symbiotic relationship. So it kind of makes sense that our whole bodies have co-evolved and all our systems have co-evolved with these bacteria. So fortunately, they love the same diet as the same one that benefits us, benefits them as well. Which is great news. And they love lifestyle medicine. So they're going, lifestyle medicine conference, like a gut microbiome conference as well.
Yeah, they're probably loving it. And that's the thing.
They are loving it.
As I learned more and more about lifestyle medicine, I then realized that I just see my body as a child, because everything that I'm supposed to implement, you do it naturally for your children. So right now, I've got a daughter who's going to be 4 next month, and I've got a 1.5-year-old. When it's just things that come innately, because you can see it so quickly in children. When you change certain things, their behavior changes so quickly. And so if I don't in the morning get them up and get them into sunlight and get them moving and do some kind of action early in the morning, I just know how the rest of the day is going to go. Oh yeah, absolutely. If they eat the wrong things, or they're overstimulated, or they haven't had enough sleep, you see it immediately. It's just that as adults, we're just really good at masking those things or functioning despite them, somewhat functioning, should I say. And then also we're just good at that.
I think that's a really good point. And that's why I like this idea of, you know, sometimes you do have to parent yourself, or when people with pets always surprise me, because I get some patients, lovely patients, who come in, they're really struggling to motivate themselves to make changes to reverse their diabetes, and they just don't see themselves almost as worthwhile, or they don't believe it will change things yet. One lady I'm thinking of recently has got 3 dogs. She absolutely adores them. She buys the most expensive, incredible supplements, chemicals, you know, food. She'll walk them for just the right amount of time. And she would, if she heard that nuts were bad for them, she would be so diligent about giving the right amount of sleep and nutrition. So we've actually started working using that idea of petting herself, because I said, would you do that for your pet? She goes, no, okay, I will walk, you know. And also this idea that you want to be your best self, to look after your kids, to look after your pets, be there for the people that you love. And you'll know this mental health, anxiety, it's fantastic to know there's so much you can do about it using these lifestyle medicine modalities. And if we're talking about the gut-brain axis and it's the impact of these microbes on your brain as well, again, all the things that you talk about, so what you eat, physical activity, you know, movement and connection, all these things are good for your gut microbes as well. So it's like you're doing one thing and it's helping everything. And it's just, it's making it work properly. So even more evidence for lifestyle medicine. And I do love that. And I think you're exactly right that if we kind of think, what would I do for a child who are super smart, you know, 5-year-old kid, smartest person on the planet, you know, they really, you know, so we're not talking about being condescending. We're talking about a beautiful living organism that is the child working in the best possible way. And you know, and we are equally lovely and deserve to be looked after, but we have to look after ourselves. You have to kind of parent yourself, and if you won't do it for yourself, then do it for the people around you, because you want to be your best self for them, whether it's your kids or your pets or whoever.
Absolutely. And with that being said, tripping over my words, in this podcast, I always want to not just give people knowledge, and, you know, everything that you shared has been empowering for many people to go out there and start making those changes and understanding how their body works better. But I always want to give practical tips as well. And so say someone has been listening, and I know there's going to be some of you out there who have been listening and think, okay, you know what? I think from what you're saying, I am quite stressed and maybe I'm not connecting enough, or actually, is my gut health good? Am I eating too much junk food? Am I feeding this amazing Amazonian rainforest that's living inside of me? How on earth do I start? What do I do? And are there like a few practical things for starting points in trying to heal or rebuild your gut again?
Absolutely. You can start now. You can make a difference within 24 hours. You know, you can just get going. And I am a terrible cook. I really find it a bit boring. And so I like things that are kind of, and that's why plants are so great, because they go, Siobhan, look, just put me in the oven and leave me alone. Don't do anything fancy. Just put me in there, take me out and eat me with hummus, and I'm good to go.
We'll be good.
And soups. And so we're talking plants. Okay. So these microbes in your gut, they like breaking down. They have the enzymes that some of the enzymes we don't even have. So we don't have these enzymes, this machinery. So we kind of outsource it to our bacteria and say, I don't know, I can't break down these plant fiber walls. Can you do it for me? They do, and they make these brilliant chemicals. So they need plants, and they need whole plants. I mean, whole food. So you don't want, when I say plants, you know, orange juice wouldn't be as good as a couple of oranges. So you want them to be as least processed as possible. You want diversity. So if you just have broccoli, then the broccoli loving microbes be like, yeah, I love this. And the other ones will be, Lord, what about me? I don't like broccoli. So you need to give it huge diversity. So they say over 30 different fruit, veg, whole grains and legumes. If you can have over 30 different types a week. And if that sounds, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do that, then two things. One is herbs and spices count. And secondly, do not be, you know, the Iceland big packs of different veg, all frozen, is perfect when you get those packs made into a soup or something. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be fancy. So, you know, all those kind of tins of chickpeas and making chili curries. So all those things, and making big batches of things and using them throughout the week. And one day you turn it into a soup, another day you turn it into a curry, just call it different things, put a few different things in it. You can tell a lot about
you know what?
You'll be able to do it.
And you know what? I've learned another trick well, not a trick, but another way of getting more variety as well is, say you're going to make something that has, most things, you know, curries, whatever, has some onions in the bottom. You could have a variety of onions in there, so you're not having to think of new recipes, but have some spring onions, some red onions, some white onions, some shallots. That's actually variety.
That is variety. And also when you're thinking, you know, I'm not, so if you have some onions and some garlic and some, you know, ginger. I mean, that's sort of 3 things. And then some herbs and spices. You already got about 7 things in there before you're even starting, just with that base. So absolutely. Then you'll hear about the rainbow. Eat the rainbow. Why do they say that? It's because of this diversity thing. If you're eating different colors of the rainbow, then you are eating a diversity. So if you go into the supermarket, so when you go into your supermarket, I want you to imagine that these big doors come down and they lock you in that bit in the middle with the fruit and veg.
Yeah,
and
stay there.
Kids go, no, and it's like the worst thing that's ever happened. They're going, no, where's the pizza? So you have to stay there, and maybe you're allowed around the corner where they've got the kind of tins of kidney beans and things like that, and the herbs and spices. You are allowed there, but you have to kind of get all your stuff there. So we're talking, baked potatoes with sort of beans or chili curry, or really simple, good, nutritious food, which is sort of cheap. And if you're going plant-based, it's a lot cheaper as well. It's also, I do try a bit of fermented food is really good for your bugs, but don't be too worried about that. But if you are in a family where you've got a relative who is making fermented food and you kind of were laughing at them going, I'm not eating that, then get them back in. Eat it. You're really lucky, or have a look at YouTube, do some recipes. But it's also, so we're talking plants, we're talking, leave them as close to nature as you can. Don't do too much to them, don't pulverize them too much. We're talking diversity, colors of the rainbow. And the only other thing I'd say is what you don't have, because these are things that make your bacteria thrive and grow. There's also things that make them wither and die. And those are ultra processed food, emulsifiers, and artificial sweeteners. So all these artificial things. So I am a child who was brought up in this era of these kind of microwave foods, and that's we're talking about our timelines, Amanda. As I sat there, my mum and dad were running a business, and they thought, it's brilliant, you can just have this fake food, which is probably really nutritious and probably better than boring old whole food. So I was kind of, brought up with a lot of that. We now realize that it's toxic to your gut microbiome, but it didn't even exist in those times. They didn't. And it actually sort of kills all the good bugs, and sort of it's really bad. So that's another reason why simple, home cooked, cheap things are much, much better. And the other weird thing, I will stop in a moment, you can tell I'm enthusiastic.
No.
Putting together all your lifestyle medicine stuff that you talk about so beautifully on your podcast, you're astonishingly, these bugs have a sleep-wake cycle. So they like to be really active, making these metabolites at some times, and then they like to do other things at other times. So they get really confused if you're up all the time, and they're trying to sort out all this factories, and you're piling in the wrong food at the wrong time and killing them all with emulsifiers. Give them some space, and don't be feeding them all the time. They love a long break. So time restricted eating, or otherwise known as going to bed and not eating after, o'clock at night. We call it something now, but in old-fashioned times that would be like 7 o'clock, you've had your supper, you don't need snacks,
there's nothing else.
Nothing till breakfast. Now we have to call it something, don't we? Time restricted eating. So it's called not eating all the time, because they like these breaks where they can do sort of metabolic things and get themselves back in gear and do all the tidying up and clearing away. So that's another thing as well. They seem to like physical activity. When you go out in nature, you can collect other microbes. So there's this wonderful stuff that's happening if you're they like physical activity. So it is all new science. So I'm not going to say they know everything, and it's really complex, the science. How do you prove that doing physical activity impacts your gut? But using various animal studies and various other cell culture studies, they're sort of beginning to realize that it does seem that when you do physical activity, that you get a better team of microbes. And when you're sedentary and not moving at all, those seem to shrink away and you get less beneficial microbes. There's a big association there. So all these lifestyle things that we do seem to have an impact, including connecting to people and keeping your stress levels low. When your stress levels are high, you're pumping out cortisol. Cortisol does lots of things in the gut which are negative to your gut microbes. They seem to reduce the good ones, increase the bad ones. Therefore, you're reducing the good chemicals I was talking about. You're increasing the toxic chemicals. And it also does this thing to your gut barrier where it makes it not function very well. It opens up and is a bit too leaky. So you leak all these potential pathogens through. They kick off your immune system. Your immune system screams and causes inflammation. And you get this chronic low-grade inflammation, which seems to trigger a lot of these chronic diseases or be part of the pathogenesis. So that's the other thing as well. So all these lifestyle measures, things are important. But the key one we know really works really potently is food. And it's the food as
plants.
Yeah.
And what I always say is, you know, it starts in the supermarket. It really does. If you try and make sure that the food that you buy that stays in your house, make it as simple as possible and try and be strict with that. Don't go shopping when you're hungry. You know, it's great that there's online shopping as well now. Sometimes you can do that basket without getting tempted by everything else that's there. And when you go into the shops, make sure you start off in the fresh produce aisle and go in the order of things like from fresh produce to tins. And then going over to the whole grain kind of things and trying to make the order in which you go for the shop, so that, you know, we're in a cost of living crisis. So then you've got a certain amount of money. And so if you filled up your basket or your trolley with all the good things, you're kind of, you know, you don't have any money to do anything else. And if you've won that battle there, when you're at home, because we all still get those cravings. I've changed my diet drastically in the last 2 years. But do I still sometimes want a slice of cake or some crisp or something like that? Absolutely. But what happens is that when I'm home and I want that, I open my cupboard and it's not there. And so if I really want it, I've got to put my shoes on, my coat, go outside and get it. And so even just making a bit of friction between those harder choices.
And it does work. Really the studies show that little bit of friction does work, because you and I know, I mean, I am a kind of all or nothing girl. If there's 6 bars of Cadbury's chocolate there, there's 6 bars here in my tummy. I can't really do that. So, I mean, I just like, you know, I have to, whereas if I have to get my shoes on and go out, I just kind of, you know, lose the will and I just don't quite do it. So you're quite right. Just creating friction. You think, how can that work? But it does. But also lots of people listening will be from different backgrounds, different cultures. If you look at the food that your grandparents used to make, whatever culture you're from, often there were those plant-based, either whether it's curries or, you know, noodles and, you know, tofu. Often those really simple things, which are really cost effective. I like to really focus on people who've got no motivation, you know, no money and very low kitchen skills, because there are so many things out there. You know, if you're talking about soups, you know, hummus, you know, carrot sticks and all the sort of, you know, roast or baked potatoes and sweet potatoes, there's loads of things you can do. And if you can look back a bit into your culture, it can be quite interesting and fun to find really simple recipes and make huge amounts of them. So they kind of, you know, sit in your freezer. Your freezer is your friend as well. But these plant-based recipes that you make from scratch go a long way, and they are really, really cost effective if you're sort of bulk cooking them. And
that's the best. I think that's like the key. It's such an important skill to learn. You might not be great at it, and maybe you can't cook to, like, you know, do a banquet or dinner parties and stuff like that, but learning how to cook, if you can make, like, you know, 75%, 80% of what you eat food that's been cooked from home already, if you're cooking it, you're taking away that ultra processed food if you're actually preparing it yourself from raw ingredients. And just that skill, and even if it means that, you know, not everyone will like it, but you can make food that you like, and just learning that cooking skill, the very simple things, throwing some things in the oven or the air fryer, putting a load of vegetables in a pot and boiling it in some stock and blending it down, you've got soup. So learn the skill, go to the supermarket.
And you can be really thrifty as well, because you go and if something's on offer, if there's a whole glut of tomatoes, then that's what you're doing, that's what they're having. And you know, that makes sense, and that's much more likely to be seasonal food, which will be packed full of much, you know, much more nutritious and better for you. And if you've got any friends who've got an allotment, or people are giving vats of, you know, I don't know, you know, apples or whatever, you know, just season and think, right, okay, what can I do with this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had loads of onions growing in my gut. Like, I don't know what happened, because my family are a family of farmers and gardeners in Jamaica. My grandparents that were over there, they have like a 10-acre farm out there, and they supply like all the people in their village basically with fresh fruit and vegetables. My granddad in the UK, he was in the paper, because in his 90s he still had an allotment, and growing up he would put like a little allotment into every one of our gardens. And so in my house, I'm not a gardener, I did not get the gene, but they put a little garden into mine, and for some reason, out of all the family, I was the one that got the onions. My onion harvest was incredible. And so I gave them out to everyone, and then I get all the pumpkins back, because loads of people have been growing pumpkins. So we've all got like this stock of pumpkins that we chop up, and they sit in the freezer for however long.
So
yeah,
that's so interesting, Amanda. I mean, you're very lucky. And I have to say, if we were sort of talking about, there's this word called prebiotics, which is foods that we know boost the growth of beneficial bacteria. And onions is one of the big ones. It's just packed full of these prebiotics. As you say, different varieties do different things. But if you've got onions, I mean, you know, you're halfway there. I also love this idea of looking back at your own culture and your own family. So my parents left school when they were about 12 or 13. And my dad, you know, had very little education and came as an immigrant to the UK. And it's quite interesting because then they went and started running a business, and they probably could cook perfectly well, all the local stuff from Ireland. They started giving people this stuff which they thought was superior, which was in fact all this ultra processed food. But I was talking to him the other day about what he used to eat when he was younger, and he saw himself as having a very poor background and not much education. But he lived on the west coast of Ireland, and he had lobster, mackerel, they grew their own potatoes, leek, parsnips, all organic, you know, that's all seen as being very affluent associated now. But, you know, it was just all, you know, eggs, fresh eggs. And these hens, he used to say, used to peck at the seaweed. So they were really bright yellow. And that's a sign of a high omega-3 content. So he was probably having this incredible diet. And yet living in what he considered, you know, on towards the poverty, they didn't, between them, you know, they had to share that between quite a big community of people. But, you know, they were eating well. He said, yeah, we eat well. And again, that seasonal eating. So oddly, now we're in our sort of modern, you know, westernized living. We would see that as very, very, you know, fancy.
Incredible. Yeah, like, wow.
And yet he threw that away and thought, hey, I'm in the UK. I'm going to buy microwavable food and, you know, and fake potatoes. I mean, he's Irish, and for a bit, we had this terrible period where we had that smash. I don't know if, I don't think it exists. Basically fake potatoes. And I think mum and dad thought, we know this is the right thing to give people and it's probably much better, but you know, I don't really like the taste of it. We might go back to just normal potatoes. But you know, there was this assumption that everything that's new and modern and made, you know, with chemicals is better, you know, like pharmaceuticals, all these drugs, all these, and we're getting to the stage we think of our evolutionary biology. It's not always the case that, you know, don't want to go back to infectious diseases and high rates of stillbirths and children dying from, I mean, that's ridiculous. But, you know, if we can take all the stuff that we've learned, but all the stuff that, you know, that nature's given us.
Yeah, that's innate to us, and bring them together.
So it's just the best of both worlds. At the moment, we've got all the advances of medicine that we're using, but actually our lifespan and our health span. So the lifespan is how long you live, 80, but the health span is you don't want to be ill for 20 years of that 80.
It's getting bigger and bigger, the gap.
It's getting bigger. And oddly, if we change these lifestyle medicine things and we use all the sort of advances of medicine, we could get people living for longer, so 80, 90 or more. But, you know, the week before they die, they're kind of out walking with their grandchildren in the hills. That's what we want. So that's
the thing, because right now, the difference between your health span and lifespan of somebody born in the UK today is like 16 years. And it's just like, who wants to live 16 years in poor health? You know, at the end of the last 16 years of your life, having to be reliant on people and not being able to engage in all the things that you love and enjoy because you haven't looked after, you know, you haven't learned how to look after your body the way that it needed to all those years ago.
There is one thing I would say there, though. The brilliant thing about lifestyle medicine is there is a lot about prevention, but it's also the management of disease.
Oh, so absolutely.
If you have diabetes or chronic disease and you're thinking, oh, it's too late. It is never too late. You can feel better within days of a dramatic change to your diet. It will help you not progress or reduce the number of medications. So it's managing your disease as well, but also reversing. So it's a really exciting thing about reversing diabetes, but reversing as well. So it's never too late. You know, whatever disease you have, whatever stage you're at, lifestyle medicine has always got something to offer. So,
and quite frankly, the more dramatic the change, the better you'll feel the benefits. You know, somebody's already like eating a somewhat healthy diet and they just start adding, you know, a bit of fermented foods in, or they try and eat some more rainbow carrots. They're likely not to always like feel that immediate change, you know, actually feel it. But if you've been eating junk and then you know, really been having quite a poor lifestyle, I guess, and then you start to optimize things and become more intentional, you're the ones that will feel it the most.
I love that. It's kind of levels the playing field, so you can get we've all got these friends who are, doing this incredible sort of lifestyle stuff, running marathons, this, that, and the other. You're quite right. If they make a little bit of a change, they're not going to see it. But if you're someone who really doesn't move at all, who's sedentary, who, like a lot of us, it triggers your brain when you have junk food and makes you release dopamine, which gives you a little bit of a high for a short time and then craving. We all recognize that. But you are the people who are going to benefit most by doing, even small changes. So standing more, moving more, removing, even if you don't, have lots of fruit and veg, even if you remove some of the junk food, you're going to have the effects on your mood, on your anxiety levels, really quickly. And that is so exciting. So if there's anyone out there going, oh my goodness, this is not for me, this is just for people who are going to do fancy pants, lifestyle medicine stuff, not at all. The worse your state or your behaviors, the more these small changes can make a difference. So you are the ones who are going to gain the most. So you're the lucky ones. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Siobhan. I feel like this whole podcast episode has been so interesting, but actually a really big message of hope as well. We said that your genes don't predict your future. It's whether you switch them on and off. And you have so many things that are in just like such little things, connecting with people and eating plants and not cooking them too much, and all those things are what can really save your health, your life, and have you having like a lot of vitality for the days that you're here. So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I know a lot of the listeners will do too.
I'm just going to say one other thing. Just the idea of people listening and thinking they're going to change themselves. I think it's also really exciting to know that, hey, I can take my family with me, I can take my friends with me, that actually you'll be able to influence other people. So even if you're, sometimes we're not great at looking after ourselves, but you might have grandchildren or parents, you might have a dad with dementia, you might have some kids that are struggling with ADHD, and actually food makes a huge difference. It alters their gut microbiome, but also lots of other body systems. So, doing it for your community, or even if you're not so motivated by yourself, kind of lots of people are motivated by looking after their pets, their grandchildren, their parents. So do it for that and enjoy it, and start kind of thinking, I used to enjoy cooking, or I used to enjoy walking, I used to enjoy dancing, all these things your gut microbiota love.
Brilliant. Thank you. And so before we sign off, would you mind sharing where people can connect with you and where we can find your podcast? And yeah,
absolutely. So Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform, it's I can't remember what it's called now, Microbiome Medics. So it's everything you might want to know about the gut microbiome and about other microbiomes, because there's also the vaginal and the skin microbiome we're going to be getting on to soon. And I'm a member of the BSLM as well, and I recommend everyone have a look at that website because it's got great information there too.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Siobhan. Have a lovely day and take care. Bye.
Lovely talking to you, Amanda, and I hope to see you again soon. Okay, bye now.